We've just got some breaking news in from Buckingham Palace, folks. So this statement has just come in from Buckingham Palace, and I'll read it for you. It goes on to say, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles.
A car without royal license plates appeared on the top-secret route reserved for Prince George. It wasn't on the escort list. It had no access permit. And most frighteningly, it appeared precisely as the young prince was about to cross the most exposed section of Windsor Castle. Just seconds before the convoy entered that area, Prince William received a sudden alert from his security team. No one knew who was in the strange car. No one could explain how they knew the exact time and route, which were stored only in the palace's most secure system. William immediately ordered, "Bring George back, now!" The car carrying Prince George changed course in silence. No sirens, no shouting. Only short, urgent commands transmitted over the radio as the entire Windsor area was sealed off. When George was safely returned, William himself stepped forward and opened the car door. The boy looked at his father in confusion, not understanding why a routine security drill had suddenly ended. William bent down, keeping his voice calm, and said, "Everything is still under control." George believed his father, but William didn't, because if that car hadn't appeared by chance, there was only one more terrifying possibility. Someone inside the palace had leaked his son's route. A few minutes later, King Charles III received the news while at dinner. The king set down his napkin, ordered everyone to leave the room, and sat alone before the urgent report. This was no longer a story about ceremony or royal power. This threat was directed straight at a child in the line of succession to the throne. Before continuing, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next developments. And please comment and let us know, where are you following this story from? Just minutes later, investigators discovered that George's route records had been opened exactly 37 minutes before the mysterious vehicle appeared. And the device that accessed them belonged to an office that no one in the palace dared name. Investigators didn't take long to determine where the file had been accessed. The technical trace led directly to a terminal located within the Queen Camilla family's administrative area. When the office name appeared on the screen, the investigation room fell almost completely silent. No one rushed to conclude that Camilla had directly ordered the access. But in a system so heavily protected that every login was recorded, the trace originating from the Queen's office was not to be taken lightly. And the investigation quickly revealed that this wasn't the first time the device had accessed sensitive documents. Not only had Prince George's rehearsal schedule been accessed, that same device had previously accessed blueprints of Prince William and Catherine's temporary residence backup routes for the Welsh family George's travel schedule information concerning Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, and emergency plans only to be used if the monarchy faced a serious crisis. In other words, someone didn't just know where George would go during a drill. That person could have seen how the entire Welsh family would be moved, where they might take refuge, and which routes would be used if real danger arose. Prince William held the report in his hand and read it from the beginning. Then he read it a second time, not because the content was difficult to understand, but because he didn't want to believe that the names of all three of his children appeared in a suspicious access sequence. Catherine sat beside him completely silent. Her gaze lingered on George's name, then Charlotte's, then Louis's. No mother could see her child's schedule whereabouts and protection plans, appearing in a compromised file, and still dismiss it as a common technical error. When asked to explain, Queen Camilla immediately denied any involvement. She asserted that she had never authorized anyone to access those documents. According to Camilla, even her closest staff were not granted access to the succession security system. But Princess Anne did not let her denials shift the focus of the investigation. She looked directly at Camilla and said coldly, "Intention is no longer the issue. The system was compromised using the login credentials of that office." Anne's statement instantly changed the atmosphere. Because if the login credentials were used without Camilla's knowledge, it meant she no longer had control over her own office. But if someone under her authority deliberately opened the file, the seriousness would be far greater. King Charles III sat at the head of the table silent for a few seconds. He looked at the access log in front of him, then slowly turned to his wife. The king's next question was no longer about equipment passwords or technical licenses. He asked, "Can you guarantee that all those working under you are absolutely loyal to the security of the line of succession?" Camilla didn't answer immediately, and that delay made the question even heavier. This was no longer an investigation into computers. It was a crisis of trust between the king and queen. It was also a question of whether the palace system was still capable of protecting the heir to the throne and the children immediately following him. Security experts presented three possibilities. The first possibility, an employee acted carelessly and opened the documents without authorization. The second possibility, login credentials were stolen or shared with an unauthorized person. The third possibility, and the most frightening, someone deliberately accessed records relating to the Welsh family. No one in the room could confirm which possibility was correct, but they all led to the same conclusion. The current system was no longer secure. William remained silent until Charles revealed another fact. The king admitted that prior to this incident, there had been 2 instances of unusual access to sensitive documents. Both incidents were handled discreetly. There was no thorough investigation. No access was suspended. Charles chose not to make a big deal out of fear that a confrontation between royal families would damage the image of the monarchy. William slowly set the report down on the table. His anger was no longer directed solely at Camilla. It began to be directed at his own father. Charles knew the system had weaknesses. He had seen the warning signs. But instead of acting, the king had chosen to maintain peace in the palace. William understood what that meant. The outward harmony had been prioritized over the safety of George, Charlotte, and Louis. In that moment, William no longer saw Charles merely as a king trying to maintain stability. He saw his father as someone who had the opportunity to protect his grandchildren, but failed to act soon enough. Charles understood that look too. For the first time, the king was forced to confront the consequences of his procrastination, and he knew the investigation could no longer continue behind closed doors as before. Immediately after dawn, the next day sealed summonses were sent to a small group of royal family members and high-ranking officials. All private appointments were immediately canceled. Security teams were reassigned. Telephones and communication devices had to be surrendered before entering the meeting room. Each summons contained only a single concise subject line: security of succession. And as the doors of the king's private quarters prepared to close, all those summoned understood that this meeting would not only decide who would be allowed access to George, Charlotte, and Louis, it could decide who King Charles still trusted within his own family. Immediately after dawn, Buckingham Palace underwent a near-complete shift in its routine. No public announcements were made, no ceremonies, no scheduled receptions. But behind the ancient stone gates, a series of urgent orders were issued. All private appointments of those summoned were immediately canceled. Security teams were redeployed around the king's private quarters. Entrances to the meeting room were guarded by additional security officers. Phones, tablets, and all communication devices had to be handed over before passing through the final door. Even private secretaries were not allowed to attend. This was the clearest indication that this meeting was unlike any that had ever taken place under the reign of King Charles III. Prince William was the first to arrive. He walked down the corridor in silence, his face almost expressionless. But before entering the meeting room, William stopped before a security officer. He asked only a brief question. "Have Catherine and the children arrived at their new safe location?" The officer immediately confirmed that everything had gone according to plan. The Welsh family had been moved to a safe backup location. George, Charlotte, and Louis had no idea why their schedule had been suddenly altered. William nodded slightly. That should have been reassuring news, but it wasn't. The danger was too close. The fact that his children were safe at this moment didn't mean the system was secure. It only proved that someone had forced them to change their lives because of a loophole within the palace itself. A few minutes later, Catherine entered. She maintained her usual composure, but her gaze remained fixed on the door as if her thoughts were still on George Charlotte and Louis. Following Catherine was Princess Anne. Anne said nothing. She simply observed each person in the room in silence. No one could guess what she was thinking. But everyone understood that Anne hadn't come to protect any family. She had come to protect the institution. The last to enter was Queen Camilla. Just as she reached the door, Camilla noticed something unusual. Her private secretary was stopped outside. The assistant tried to explain that she always attended high-level security meetings, but the guard politely replied, "By the king's order." The door closed. Camilla entered alone. At that moment, she understood immediately that her office was no longer considered a completely reliable part of the new security system, an unprecedented change under Charles's reign. The list of those summoned included Lord Chamberlain and the two heads of royal security, but one name was completely absent: Prince Harry. Although still part of the extended line of succession, Harry received no summons. This indicated that the council this time was not organized by status. It was organized based on the degree of direct involvement in protecting the closest branch of the line of succession, operational responsibility, and above all, the trust King Charles still placed in each person. When everyone had settled into their seats, Charles slowly rose. He looked around the room. His gaze settled on William, Catherine, Anne, and then Camilla. No one spoke. The silence was so profound that you could hear the rustling of pages turning on the table. Finally, Charles broke the silence. A security line had been crossed. He paused for a few seconds before continuing. The old system was no longer reliable. The king asserted that this was no longer a matter of the palace's reputation, nor was it a technical error that could be discreetly covered up. What needed protecting now was the safety of Prince William, Catherine, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Each person in the room listened with a different emotion. William viewed the whole affair with the fear of a father. Catherine wondered if her children would ever grow up with a normal childhood. Camilla felt her influence diminishing. Princess Anne saw only her responsibility to keep the system functioning correctly. And Charles, for the first time, he saw the consequences of his own procrastination. Just then, the head of security opened the official report. The first line displayed the name of Prince George. William unconsciously tightened his grip on the pen. Silence enveloped the room. Then suddenly Queen Camilla spoke. "Is the threat being exaggerated?" Charles immediately turned to look at her. The king's gaze indicated that this meeting was about to enter a much more tense phase. Queen Camilla's question plunged the room into a heavy silence. Was the threat being exaggerated? No one answered immediately. The head of security looked down at the report before him, then slowly turned to the next page. There was a list of access rights recommended for immediate suspension from Camilla's office. The Welsh family's travel schedule, information on protected residences, emergency routes, documents relating to the heir apparent, and all the data on Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. As each item was read, Camilla's expression changed. She no longer heard of security measures. She heard her position in the palace shrinking right before the eyes of all the most powerful members of the royal family. Camilla placed her hands on the table. "If my office is suspended in this way," she said, "everyone in the palace will understand that I am being accused." The head of security responded that this was a precautionary measure, not a final judgment. But Camilla did not accept that explanation. She argued that such a decision would humiliate the queen before the entire palace apparatus. Staff would begin to doubt her. Advisors would see her as someone no longer trusted by the king. And once that image was formed, her power would not be easily restored. King Charles III was silent for a few seconds. He understood what Camilla was saying. In the royal family, power doesn't just exist in written documents. It also exists in the doors that are opened, the meetings that are attended, and the secrets that are allowed to be known. If Camilla's office were removed from the succession security system, the entire palace would understand that a new line had been drawn. But Charles also understood another truth. The strange car had appeared on George's route, and that was more important than any symbol of power. He looked directly at Camilla. Protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis must take precedence over anyone's self-respect. The king's voice wasn't loud, but the words completely changed the atmosphere in the room. Camilla leaned slightly forward. "This isn't just about self-respect," she replied. "Public humiliation can destroy power. If the queen's position is weakened, the entire palace structure will be affected." Charles didn't avoid her gaze. Power without trust is truly dangerous. It was the first time in the meeting that Charles had openly placed trust above Camilla's position. William remained silent from the beginning. He had heard every defense, every warning about reputation, every argument about power. But in William's mind, there was only one image: the car carrying George approaching the open road, a strange car appearing at the right moment, and a few decisive seconds that could have changed everything. Finally, William put down his pen. "The information obtained from your office has put my son in danger." Camilla turned to him. "You're speaking as if I directly sent that route out." "I didn't say you sent it, but you're accusing me before the investigation is complete." William kept his voice calm, but his anger was no longer completely concealed. "I'm saying that the system managed by your office has failed, and my son is the one who could pay for that failure." Camilla replied that the authority of a royal family could not be stripped away because of an unproven suspicion. William looked directly at her. A father cannot wait for absolute certainty while his children remain exposed. No one spoke. That statement changed the nature of the debate. This was no longer William confronting the Queen. It was a father confronting any system that could not protect his children. Catherine sat beside William, but she did not participate in anger. She knew that if the debate revolved solely around power, George, Charlotte, and Louis would once again become names in a document. Catherine spoke in a calm voice. "The children need protection, but they cannot be made prisoners of the palace itself." She reminded them that every time the system failed, the usual reaction was to erect more barriers, change schedules, and further reduce the children's living space. George would have to learn to be suspicious of strangers. Charlotte would always be under surveillance. Louis might grow up without understanding why his childhood was different from other children's. Catherine didn't object to increased security. She just wanted the new system to protect the children without making them feel punished for their position in the line of succession. Camilla turned to Princess Anne. She understood that Anne was now being treated as an independent supervisor in the new structure. "Why you?" Camilla asked. "Why are you given the authority to monitor all of us?" Anne didn't react immediately. She closed the file in front of her and looked directly at Camilla. "Because I don't have a private office that needs protecting its influence." Camilla frowned slightly. Anne continued, "I don't have a faction in the palace. I don't need to reserve access for any particular family. My responsibility is to the crown and to those who will bear its future." Anne said that if the new structure was adopted, she would apply the same standards to everyone. No distinction between the queen, no distinction between the heir, no distinction between longtime members of the family. If an office violates the rules, access must be suspended. If login credentials are shared, permission must be revoked. If anyone puts personal interests above the safety of the line of succession, that person must be removed from the system. Camilla did not respond. Charles looked around the room and understood that he could no longer delay. If he maintained the old system, he could preserve the outward appearance of harmony. Camilla wouldn't be humiliated. The royal families would continue to coexist within a common network. But the price of that peace could be William's trust. And more seriously, it could be the safety of George, Charlotte, and Louis. Charles looked at his son. William didn't look like someone waiting to be given more power. He looked like a father who had come too close to losing his children. That was something Charles couldn't continue to ignore. The head of security moved on to the next clause. This was the most sensitive proposal in the entire dossier. If approved, Prince William would have the power to immediately suspend access to any royal office or family member when he believed George Charlotte or Louis was facing a serious threat. William wouldn't need to wait for a meeting. No need for extensive permission. No need to prioritize the palace's reputation before taking action. Camilla glanced at Charles. Anne remained calm. William still said nothing. But before the king could make a decision, a security advisor placed another petition on the table. The document didn't come from William. It came from Catherine, and her request went even further than the powers just proposed for the heir. The final proposal was placed before King Charles III. No one in the room spoke, for everyone understood that the words on it would not only change a security procedure, they could initiate a transfer of responsibility even while Charles was still on the throne. Under the new structure, Prince William would be given direct command of all decisions concerning the safety of Catherine, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. He would no longer have to wait for approval from numerous palace offices before acting. If a route was suspected, William could change it immediately. If a residence was no longer secure, he could order the entire family moved. If a schedule posed a risk, he had the power to cancel it. If an office was suspected of leaking information, he could suspend access before the investigation was complete. And if the internal system was no longer trustworthy, William had the right to request an independent investigation. Queen Camilla said nothing, but she understood the implications of each clause. From this point on, the protection of the closest branch of the succession would no longer depend entirely on the old palace network. William could act without seeking permission from the offices that had previously been able to delay decisions. Next, Princess Anne's role was announced. Anne would review the entire system every 3 months. She had the right to examine the access records of every royal family member, question private secretaries, and report directly to Charles. No intermediaries, no exceptions. The rules that applied to Camilla's office would also apply to William and any other member of the royal family. Charles retained supreme constitutional power. He remained the ultimate approver and could intervene if the new powers were abused. But the day-to-day operational decisions concerning the heir and William's children would be transferred away from the king. Charles looked down at the draft. This was something he had thought would only happen when William officially succeeded to the throne. But the leak had forced him to admit that the future could no longer be protected by a system that had lost trust. Just then, the council opened the petition that Catherine had sent privately. William turned to look at his wife. He had no idea she had made this request. Catherine wasn't asking for any special privileges for herself. She was asking that both parents have the right to act immediately if George, Charlotte, or Louis were in danger. No one should have to wait for the other's permission. No one should have to consult a committee while time was running out. Catherine calmly said, "We always talk about the heir, but before they become heirs, they are still children." She posed a simple question. If William hadn't been present when the alert was issued, would she have had to stand outside while officials debated the safety of her own children? Catherine wouldn't accept that. William was still surprised, but he immediately understood why she hadn't said so earlier. This wasn't a request on behalf of the heir. It was a mother's voice. William placed his hand on the petition and looked at Charles. The protection of the children cannot become another system controlled by men while children are only discussed remotely. Anne nodded slightly. Charles agreed. He confirmed that William and Catherine would have equal rights in all urgent decisions concerning their 3 children. But just before Charles signed the order, Camilla unexpectedly spoke up. "I need to speak with you privately." When only the king and queen were left in the room, Camilla revealed that a senior aide had confessed to sharing login credentials hours earlier. And Camilla knew it, but she chose to remain silent. When the conference room door closed, only King Charles III and Queen Camilla faced each other in a heavy silence. No advisors, no security officers, and no one else who could witness the conversation that would completely change the course of the palace. Camilla took a deep breath before speaking. She admitted that a senior aide in her office had just confessed to sharing login credentials with a temporary palace coordinator. According to the aide, this was done because the coordinator needed access to the system to complete an urgent task and had no intention of leaking confidential documents. What silenced Charles wasn't the confession itself. It was Camilla's next statement. She had known about it hours before the meeting began. However, Camilla had decided to remain silent because she wanted to verify the matter herself and protect an employee she trusted implicitly. Charles wasn't angry. He didn't bang the table or raise his voice, as Camilla had expected. The king simply looked at his wife for a long time before slowly asking, "Why did you enter the meeting to defend your office while concealing the truth that we all need to know?" Camilla tried to explain that she didn't want to ruin the career of a loyal servant because of an unverified confession. She believed she needed more time before revealing the whole truth. Charles shook his head slightly. Sharing login credentials may have started as a mistake, he said, but concealing the confession was a choice. And that choice broke trust. That statement silenced Camilla completely. In Charles's eyes, the issue was no longer the fault of an employee. What disappointed him was that the person closest to him had put personal loyalty before the safety of the line of succession. The king immediately signed a series of urgent orders. The assistant involved was suspended from duty. The terminal equipment was sealed for investigation. All access permits to Camilla's office were revoked. All access to succession information was immediately shut down. An independent investigation was launched, and all operations of Camilla's office would be subject to external oversight. Before leaving the room, Charles unconsciously twirled his wedding ring between his fingers. He did not turn to look back. Camilla remained standing alone. For the first time, she realized she hadn't lost influence because of a direct accusation, but because Charles no longer believed she would always prioritize the safety of William, George, Charlotte, and Louis over personal relationships. Meanwhile, Prince William immediately exercised the emergency powers he had just been granted. He signed an order suspending all access to information relating to George, Charlotte, and Louis for Camilla's entire office without waiting for any further vote. Hours later, the latest investigation results arrived at Charles's desk. The mysterious vehicle had been identified as belonging to a contract photographer. This person claimed to have received an anonymous message containing the exact time and route of Prince George's travels. This could only lead to a terrifying conclusion. Top-secret information had indeed left the palace walls. Following the climax of the investigation, King Charles III summoned Prince William to his private library. No advisors, no secretaries, no royal protocol. In the room, there was only the father and his son, his heir. Charles admitted that he had previously opposed separating security management from the palace's overall system. He believed a unified structure would protect the image of a united royal family. He worried that giving too much power to William would lead the public to believe the throne was weakening or a new center of power was emerging. But now Charles understood that unity without trust was merely a facade. He admitted he should have acted immediately after the first unusual access incident instead of delaying to avoid a family dispute. Charles looked directly at his son. "I prioritized the peace of the palace over warning signs." He paused before continuing, and that hesitation put George in unnecessary danger. "I apologize." William didn't respond with anger. He recounted that after being moved to safety, George had asked a question he could never forget. "Does being the heir mean strangers will always know where I am?" William said that question haunted him more than any security report. He feared that the crown was no longer a future duty, but had become a shadow over George's childhood. Charles fell silent. Then the king placed the document transferring authority on the table. He officially gave William command of the entire succession security system. William accepted but made one condition. Catherine had to have equal authority in all decisions concerning George Charlotte and Louis. Charles did not argue. He personally took a pen, added Catherine's name to the document, and signed it. That moment wasn't a victory for William over his father. Charles hadn't yet crowned him. He bestowed his trust before the time for succession arrived. William accepted the responsibility without seeking power for himself, and Catherine officially became an equal part of the system protecting her children. Just after noon, Buckingham Palace prepared to issue an official announcement. The whole of England was about to know that William and Catherine had just been granted unprecedented authority. That evening, King Charles III signed the perpetual decree in the presence of William, Catherine, Anne, and Camilla. No one saw it as a victory. Camilla accepted the new limitations without objection. Anne pledged that all members of the royal family would follow the same rules. William promised not to turn his newly acquired power into a court opposed to his father's. Catherine looked down at the decree and said, "Securing the succession is not just about protecting the crown. It's about protecting the people who will bear its responsibilities in the future." Charles placed his hand on William's shoulder. "The future is now in your hands. You must protect it yourself." William simply nodded silently, for that power was not a reward. It was the responsibility of a father and a future king. At Adelaide Cottage, the laughter of George, Charlotte, and Louis echoed as usual. But from now on, their childhood will be surrounded by an extra layer of protection, and also an extra price to pay. Do you think Charles was right to grant power to William and Catherine while still reigning? Or will this decision create two centers of power within the royal family? Please leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for the latest updates. Thank you for watching.